If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. You are now entering the Stone Zone. Today, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome one of the boldest, most outspoken conservative voices in the country, former congressman from Florida's 1st District, now host of the Matt Gaetz Show on One America News. Former Congressman Matt Gaetz joins us in the Stone Zone. Matt, welcome.
Well, it's great to be with you, Roger. Thanks for having me back.
Matt Gaetz has consistently been one of President Trump's strongest and most effective advocates all the way back to his first election. He is an unwavering conservative. It is thanks to his courage and leadership that Mike Johnson is now the Speaker of the House rather than the hapless and pathetic Kevin McCarthy. And Matt Gaetz is also outspoken. He is a man who speaks the truth. Matt, let's kind of start from the beginning. How do you think President Trump's unpredictable and incredible second term is stacking up compared to his first term as president?
They are different. Admittedly, they are different, and I would say that the touchstone of that difference is the difference in personnel. In the first administration, we had so many snakes in the grass. President Trump had rolled into Washington with a New York Rolodex, and a lot of the people he relied upon in Washington, D.C. betrayed him. They were more interested in getting people who they could milk for influence peddling than people truly dedicated to President Trump's principles and his vision and his agenda. And that's just so different than what you see now. You see a cabinet that's really working together as a team. You see both horizontal integration across agencies to do things like the deportation agenda, which it requires a DOD component, a Department of Justice component, obviously DHS as the lead. But then we also have a lot more continuity vertically. We were always facing liars, leakers at the deputy assistant secretary level, and those folks who sometimes are Senate confirmed, but not the names that you see most frequently in the news. And more through the first term, and frankly through the 4 years that we spent in the wilderness thereafter, we got a really good sense of who would do a good job. And not everyone's perfect. There are, of course, times when everyone, myself included, need encouragement to focus on the right prioritization of our incredibly long task list. But at the end of the day, there's vertical and horizontal integration, and then the president is able to be more comfortable and in his bag. When Trump was first in office, he was so aggrieved and angry about the lies of the Russia hoax and what was happening to you and what was happening to General Flynn and what was happening to George Papadopoulos and what was happening to his own family. They were trying to throw Don Jr. in prison, and they were not kidding about that. That was not like a PR stunt. That was an actual resourced effort. And he was so aggrieved by that, and yet rescued the economy anyway and did a number of other great things. But now he is able to approach the presidency with, I think, a full suite of skills and assets and agencies and experiences that are going to make this the most consequential 4 years for the country, I think, in my lifetime.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment. I think in his first term, he came to Washington from the world of business, and he not unreasonably thought, well, there's the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats are my opponents. The Republicans are my allies, not recognizing that there were many in the Republican Party who resented his nomination, resented his rise, did not support his America First agenda. Ironically, I think he's now, even though I think he was a great president in his first term, bringing us a record-breaking economy, rebuilding our military strength, appointing scores of conservatives to the federal courts, just for a couple of examples. But I actually think he's now a greater president in his second term because he was so battle-hardened by those 4 years in the wilderness. Those 4 years in the wilderness, he got to really understand the deep state and their viciousness and their duplicity. And today, he's just a much wiser, tougher, more seasoned leader. I have said on the show.
Nothing rattles him, Roger. Nothing rattles him now. Like think about where we've been. I mean, this is a man who has survived multiple assassination attempts and having to sit there in that dank New York courtroom as he was subjected to this absurd criminal prosecution. And now he's like, oh, what? The best you have is the No Kings rally? Like the best you have are like some boomers sweating to the oldies and some pitbull adopting lesbians and confused transsexuals as like the base of what you're going to do to try to win back a majority of the country. It's laughable to see how Democrats are responding now, given what Trump has endured. Like, what? What are you going to do? Shut the government down? Fine. I'll pay the troops anyway. I'll act, and you all will look like a bunch of clowns, and we'll own it. And that's just the kind of clarity of decision-making you probably only get with the concoction of experiences that we've been going through.
I agree with your assessment. I'm a fan of Speaker Mike Johnson. I don't think people have a clear understanding of how difficult his job is because the Republican caucus is very broad. Let's face it, there are some rhinos in that caucus. They're not interested in reform. They're not interested in exposing the corruptions of the Biden crime family. They're not interested in holding people accountable. And then there are others in the caucus who are true radicals who really believe deeply in the America First agenda, want to bring reform. And of course, the speaker has to get enough votes to pass anything. What's your assessment of the speaker?
Well, I personally like him a great deal and still communicate with him frequently when I have ideas or when he wants to share what's going on in the House. I think in terms of the inner workings of the Republican primary, let's just be super reductive about it. There's us and there's them. And the us are people who are not bought and paid for by big business. The us are people who don't want more wars. The us are those of us who are very suspicious of increased federal surveillance of everything. And the them, we think, are the kind of amnesty-curious, pro-interventionist, Chamber of Commerce Republicans. And Mike is one of us. But what has created frustration at times is that we always thought he would be more willing to squeeze them. Like, we believed Mike emerging as a movement conservative would make Mike more likely to say to the war pimps and the surveillance snoops and the amnesty-curious crowd that it's just not going to be that way. And, of course, you're right. There's a math problem, and the core of that math problem is in the United States House of Representatives, there are more of them than there are of us, and that's what the speaker has to balance daily.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to former Congressman Matt Gaetz, now the host of the Matt Gaetz Show on One America News. Matt Gaetz is a bold conservative, a trained attorney, a fiery debater, and a political lightning rod who never shies away from a fight. We're pleased to have him. Today, your former colleague, Jim Jordan, made a formal referral of former CIA Director John Brennan to the U.S. Justice Department for lying to Congress multiple times about material matters furthering the Russian collusion hoax. You have been, as I have, a strong supporter of Attorney General Pam Bondi. Do you have confidence that Brennan, Mueller, Comey, Clapper, et al., McCabe, and others will actually be held to account, that they will actually be charged for their egregious crimes of seditious conspiracy to undo the 2016 election?
I do believe that they will be charged. I do believe it will be a conspiracy charge. And I think the reason that it will be a conspiracy charge is so that you can avoid the judicial death trap that is venue in the greater Washington, D.C. area, where you get so many of these public employees and radical liberal Democrats in every jury pool. But I believe that there was a criminal conspiracy to undermine, or the workings of President Trump on a lot of fronts. And I think the December 9th meeting that Obama had directing his top deep state officials to concoct this Russia hoax was one act in furtherance of that conspiracy. But you know what another act was, I think, in furtherance of it? The raid at Mar-a-Lago. Because some of the documents President Trump had in his possession were the documents that were exculpatory for him, that proved that what you had observed from the Obama team was false. And so when they directed the government to go and raid his home to get the evidence in their own possession that demonstrated their own criminal culpability, that would then use such a conspiracy charge in the Southern District of Florida. I've lived in the Southern District. You live in the Southern District, Roger. I think that the jury pool we get in the Southern District of Florida is way more likely to administer justice. Now, as to the specific act of Brennan in furtherance of the conspiracy, there is, I believe, perjury to questions I asked. I was the one asking questions of Brennan in a recent deposition just a couple years ago within the statute of limitations. And ostensibly the deposition was about the Hunter Biden cover-up and the Hunter Biden, laptop story being Russian disinformation. But maybe I know we've only got a minute or so left here, but maybe we'll chat about it in the next segment, how we were able to get Brennan talking about the Steele dossier, his role in getting that pollinated around the intelligence community, and how that really became central to the public relations drive to convict all of you in the media before anyone had a fair opportunity to present evidence.
Yeah, I think you raise an excellent point. Lying to Congress is the least of John Brennan's problems. Here's a man who is an admitted communist, who we know spied on a U.S. Senate committee that was investigating his illegal use of torture as the CIA director. The man who signed the visas for 4 of the hijackers who were told attacked America on 9/11. And the guy who knew that the Steele dossier, the fake report paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, commissioned by Hillary Clinton's campaign, was jammed into President Barack Obama's intelligence briefing, so it could be used as the rationale for illicit FISA warrants so they could spy on Donald Trump's campaign, as well as the rationale for the appointment of Robert Mueller, who tried to send me to prison for the rest of my life, as well as destroying President Trump and my good friend General Flynn. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is an unapologetic defender of the America First agenda, an outspoken conservative, a man who came to my aid when I was in deep water. We're honored to have him, and don't go away. We'll be right back with more of Matt Gaetz. In the meantime, don't forget to check out Matt's show, The Matt Gaetz Show, on One America News. Whatever you do, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This shrimp and coconut sauce is divine. What's your secret?
Goya coconut milk.
How does it taste so good?
It's all in that real coconut flavor and that rich, creamy texture.
What about thickeners and added sugars?
None. Just smooth, coconutty goodness.
What can I make with it?
From curries to sweet treats like coconut flan, the possibilities are endless.
Goya coconut milk. Take your cooking to the next level. No question about it. Find it in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. We're talking to former Congressman Matt Gaetz, one of the most outspoken and articulate supporters and advisors to President Donald Trump. Matt, you recently made a tongue-in-cheek post on X insinuating that the moon landing was faked. I made the same mistake several years ago. I actually said I thought the whole thing was shot in a warehouse in New Jersey. It was a joke, but many people on X can't take a joke. As a man who's authored a number of books on conspiracies myself, I'm kind of wondering, what conspiracies piqued your interest and why?
Well, I will, of course, affirm that was a joke. I was reposting a post that had suggested that there were two moons, and of course there aren't two moons for Earth, and so I was joking that if there were two moons, we ought to fake a landing on the second fake moon, which of course, you're right. Sometimes it's funny just to see what will get a rise out of people on X. But isn't there an odd life cycle to conspiracies? Like first, if you say something like the vaccine might hurt you, or there were a lot of federal officers and agents on the grounds of January 6th, or actually it was Hillary Clinton benefiting from support from Russians. But if you said those things, first it was a conspiracy, then it was Russian disinformation, then it was like true, but you could still be hunted for it, and then finally, like actually, the left did some great thing for you. I mean, it's just they come true so frequently, and so those are things I've been called a conspiracy theorist for. 60 Minutes did a whole segment on how Tucker Carlson and I were conspiracy theorists because we said that the coronavirus came out of the Wuhan lab and not out of the pangolin at the animal market. So that's another conspiracy that came true.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the 4 phases of life. You know what they are? Who is Matt Gaetz? Get me Matt Gaetz. Get me a Matt Gaetz type. Who is Matt Gaetz? That kind of sums up celebrity in America today. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to former Congressman Matt Gaetz, who formerly represented Florida's 1st District in Congress. When we come back, I'm going to ask Matt Gaetz about a ongoing scandal in Florida in which Governor Ron DeSantis and his wife and the current Attorney General seem to me to have been caught red-handed taking $10 million in Medicare funds that was earmarked for the poor, the elderly, and the disabled, and moving it to a dark money account where they used it to fight 2 statewide initiatives that they opposed that were on the ballot in the Sunshine State. It is reported that a state grand jury is looking into this matter. Congressman Gaetz has been quite vocal about it, as have I. I want to ask him about that. So when we come back, Matt Gaetz is going to bring us up to date on his views regarding politics in the Sunshine State. And then we'll talk a bit more about the situation in the Middle East, where I think Matt Gaetz has been unfairly criticized. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with more of this terrific interview with Congressman Matt Gaetz.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone with former Congressman Matt Gaetz, now the host of the Matt Gaetz Show at One America News. If you haven't tuned in for Matt Gaetz' show, it is terrific. Don't miss it. I raised a question in the last segment about Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Now, I am a pretty vociferous critic of Ron DeSantis because I think he owes his governorship to Donald J. Trump. His rise in the Republican primary was due to a Trump endorsement, and his victory in that election, where he won by 25,000 votes in 2018 out of 8.9 million votes cast, I think is due to the fact that President Trump, on the advice of Matt Gaetz and others, changed his schedule 3 times in the closing days of that election to help drag Ron DeSantis over the finish line for a very tight race. More recently, Governor DeSantis and his wife and the man they appointed Attorney General of Florida, James Uthmeier, have been accused of taking $10 million from Medicare funds, money that was specifically earmarked for the poor, the elderly, and the handicapped, and moving that money to a dark money account where they used it to fund initiatives against the legalization of cannabis. This has been widely reported in both the Miami Herald and the Orlando Sun-Sentinel. I think it is a very serious scandal. It's amazing to me how few people in Florida actually know about this. As I indicated, there is a state grand jury that's been impaneled and seems to be hearing evidence in this matter. Matt, how serious is this, and what is your assessment?
I think the conduct is pretty seriously wrong. There's a state managed care entity, and they had overbilled the state, some gargantuan amount. And actually, years ago, had offered to settle that dispute for $67 million. And the state of Florida said, no, we won't settle the dispute at that amount. And then years later, when Ron DeSantis and James Uthmeier needed to find money to defeat a marijuana legalization amendment that they didn't like, they go back and say, well, tell you what, instead of giving the state $67 million, why don't you give $57 million back to the state that you overbilled, and then let's take $10 million and run it through some charity of my wife, and then some shadowy C4 organizations, and then lo and behold, the money pops up in the political committee of the then chief of staff, now Attorney General James Uthmeier. And if it is legal to say to someone that instead of paying the money back to the folks that they jilted, that they can instead send the money to your political committee to run political ads, then we have legalized theft, and we shouldn't. And I think that's why there's a grand jury answering questions about whether or not someone should be charged with a crime.
I think that's an excellent assessment. How would you assess the current race for governor of the Sunshine State? I'd kind of hope that you would run. I think it's pretty clear at this point that you've decided to dedicate yourself to the Matt Gaetz Show, where you're an important and bold voice for conservative views. How do you assess the current race for governor?
I like what I'm doing now. I think Byron is a good guy, and it's easy to see why he's got so many supporters. I don't know that the field is fully set, and I'm paying close attention to it. I will say on the Democrat side, the fact that they seem to be running David Jolly is such a meme for how far the Democrat Party in Florida has fallen. Like, I'm just wondering, Roger, did a group of Democrats get together over there on Adams Street and say, tell you what, when we ran Charlie Crist last time, a former Republican from Pinellas County who had a cup of coffee in Congress, we almost got there. We lost by 20. And so let's take the Charlie Crist archetype, a former Republican from Pinellas County who had a cup of coffee in Congress, and let's zap it of any personality. That's basically what you get with David Jolly. It's like Charlie Crist without the personality. So I think that certainly, we've got folks in the cabinet now who regularly eye the governorship. We've got a number of folks in Congress who I think look at it. I like what I'm doing now on the Matt Gaetz show, but it'll be interesting to watch over the next several months.
Yeah, Charlie Crist is an amazing guy. First of all, as you know, he's eminently likable. It's almost impossible to dislike him. But how one can go from a Ronald Reagan conservative, which is what he always called himself, to being a Barack Obama Democrat, stopping briefly to be an independent on his way there, it reminds me of that joke, a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent walked into a bar, and the bartender said, "Hi, Charlie." It really is. And David Jolly's not only a former Republican Congress of the Rhino stripe, but now he's a lobbyist. I actually almost feel sorry for the Florida Democrats. They literally have no bench whatsoever. They can't come up with a viable candidate for governor. So I think whoever the Republican nominee is likely to be elected. I agree with you, however, that the field may not be full. I notice that you are frequently put into the league with my friend Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, others, and being defamed as anti-Semitic. I've known you a long time. I know that that's the furthest thing from the truth. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we should put America's interests first rather than Israel's interests first. As President Nixon used to say, doesn't mean that we aren't pro-Israel, doesn't mean that we don't recognize that Israel is a friend and ally, but an American president must always put the interests of America first. And then there's this insane claim that because you take that position, which I think is the correct position, that you are somehow compensated by Qatar or compensated by some state entity to hold the views that you have. I think this is outrageous and unfair. Well, how do you respond to these fake allegations?
Well, it's just so silly, Roger, because it doesn't happen anywhere else. When I criticize the Chinese, no one says that I'm xenophobic. When I criticize the country of Niger for throwing out American troops, no one said I was doing it because I hated black people. But somehow, if you're critical of the decisions of the Netanyahu government, rather than engaging those criticisms logically and thoroughly, people like to just throw them in the well-used bucket of anti-Semitism. And I would warn those who overuse that phrase, look what happened to the people who overused racism, right? The people who saw racism lurking behind every corner ultimately became beclowned in society, and the same may become true of people who think that every legitimate criticism of a government's actions when tens of thousands of people are dying is somehow rooted in hatred for a people or a country. I want what's best for Israel. I want what's best for the Jewish people. I hope that they thrive. That's not the view of someone who's anti-Semitic. I do believe that the decisions of the Netanyahu government not only are not in America's best interest, I don't even think they're in Israel's best interest. I think they're just in Netanyahu's best interest. I think this is a guy who tries to externalize conflict because it is the only way he is able to hold power. So he has disrupted all of this great work President Trump has tried to do for peace. I mean, just think about when they were bombing Qatar. They were bombing Qatar because one way to make sure that there's no peace deal is executing the people who might sign it. And I think that has been very revealing, not only to President Trump, who has great instincts, but also to the country at large. When you look at the sympathies for Israel after the October 7th attack, they were rightly and justly at a zenith. People were horrified by that. And you compare those numbers now, more and more polling is suggesting there are greater sympathies with the Palestinians than with Israelis that are aligned with the Netanyahu government. So I will continue to cover what is happening in Israel, in the Middle East. I think it's very important. I am 43 years old. In most of my life, I've seen my friends, my neighbors, people I care deeply for get drug into these stupid wars in the Middle East. And I think that that happened because people weren't asking the right questions. President Trump asks the right questions, is reposition the Republican Party, and I'm going to be to make sure that there's not a reversion to the neoconservative mean.
Yeah, I completely agree. All this anti-Qatar hysteria is really ridiculous. Qatar's mediation was important in achieving President Trump's most recent peace deal, and President Trump considers them a great ally. So all of this bizarre animus is really strange. You actually talked about how you found someone rummaging through your stuff during a visit to Israel. Can you explain exactly what happened and why you believe they were doing that?
It was an APAC trip, and I had been in South America previously. I had eaten some grubs and had some really bad digestive distress, and so instead of like climbing some mountain in Israel as I was planned to do, I scurried back to my hotel room, and there was a person in my room, and they were snooping around, for lack of a better term. I asked them what they were doing there. They said that they were with the hotel and they were making sure that everything in my room was appropriately appointed, but that made no sense. This person had no hotel name badge, they had no clipboard, and before I knew it, they flipped out and were gone. And when I reported that to my committee chairman, to the leader of the delegation, I was told, make sure not to leave anything important in your room when you're traveling abroad, which probably is good advice. And I wasn't carrying around Joe Biden's classified documents or John Bolton's love notes to himself, but it was revealing that even in Israel we had to maintain our guard.
I noticed that you recently had some words with Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Can you describe what happened there and what facilitated that exchange?
I like Mike Huckabee personally a great deal. When I first ran for Congress, he had a fundraiser for me in his home. Mike Huckabee was very angry that Zionist touring Christians were getting delayed visas. And so he wrote a letter to the Israeli government saying that this was wrong, that those American Christians should be able to come without the harassment. He described it as harassment and negative treatment the government was imposing. And then quite interestingly, he said that if the visas were not resolved, his remedy would be to encourage those people to not come, in other words, boycott. He would encourage Americans not to give to groups within Israel, also known as divestment, and he would in turn not approve visas for Israelis wanting to go to the United States, also known as a sanction. And so I found it very interesting. I reported on this back in July, but Mike Huckabee was using boycott, divest, and sanction strategies against Israel to achieve this result. And lo and behold, it worked. BDS, done by Mike Huckabee to Israel, was effective, and he used shrewd diplomacy to get Americans their approvals. And thereafter, I think more recently, someone posted the video, and Mike Huckabee said, well, this is a lie. I never called for BDS. And I had to remind Ambassador Huckabee of the words in his very own letter from months earlier.
Matt, your leadership through that long, seemingly endless Republican caucus was inspiring. You took a lot of heat for it, but you stood tall, and the result, I think, was very, very much worth it. I think that those who have already thrown in the towel on the midterm elections are making an enormous mistake. Several months ago, I did Laura Loomer's show on Rumble, and she said, we're going to lose the midterms elections. I realize that in American politics, a week is a lifetime, and you can't determine what's going to happen more than a year from now today. If you had to assess the upcoming midterms, understanding that a lot will go down between now and then, what do you think is the likely result?
Roger, you and I spent all this time talking about why people vote and how that moves the balance of power. But as I look at the battle space right now, I think the midterms are going to be determined by some of this devious cartography. I think that who controls the House of Representatives in the midterms is going to be really, really driven by the Gavin Newsom effort in California, whether or not there's a corresponding effort in Indiana, and whether or not Florida gets additional congressional seats for reapportionment as a consequence of more accurate census data.
I think that's a good assessment. And obviously, the state of the economy is going to be key, as it always is. I mean, President Trump's critics said that if he pursued better tariff deals with our trading partners, that is to say, tariff arrangements that are good for both us and our trading partners, as opposed to giving away the store, as we have traditionally done, well, the stock market would crash, inflation would skyrocket, unemployment would be out of control. Of course, none of those things has happened. This past June was the first month in 15 years that the United States government actually ran a surplus, meaning we took in more money than the government paid out, which is almost a miracle. Then Elon Musk, somebody I admire very much and I like because he stood tall for free speech when he bought Twitter and converted it into X, he took the extraordinary step of revealing all of the internal documents and documentation that showed that those in our intelligence services under Joe Biden and Barack Obama worked hand in glove with Twitter executives to censor people like, well, Matt Gaetz and me, and anyone who questioned President Trump, the safety and effectiveness of the COVID vaccination, the outcome of the 2020 election, the Russian collusion hoax, the validity of Hunter Biden's laptop revelations. So can we ever really, as a former member, can we ever really make the deep cuts in federal spending to get rid of the, not millions, not billions, but literally trillions of dollars of waste, fraud, and corruption that Elon Musk identified?
I mean, of the 435 votes in Congress, there aren't 100 of them to do that. There might be 80, 85 on a real good day where everybody's had their caffeinated coffee and is feeling a full bout of courage. But, what's the goal of a politician? To get elected, and then to get reelected, and then to get elected to higher office.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to former Congressman Matt Gaetz, one of the boldest and most outspoken conservatives in the country today. He is the host of the Matt Gaetz Show on One America News. If you haven't checked out his show, you absolutely must. It is must watching and listening for conservative Americans. You're listening to the Roger Stone Show right here in the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial, because we'll be back with one more segment with one of the most outspoken and courageous conservatives in America today, former Congressman Matt Gaetz. Don't go away.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
And he's a great, great person, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone.
This episode is brought to you by Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 is the ultimate all-out warfare experience. Rip through the skies in aerial dogfights. Demolish your surroundings for a strategic advantage. Harness complete control over every action and movement using the kinesthetic combat system. Drop into multiplayer with your squad, or fight furiously as a member of the Dagger 1-3 squad in a gritty, adrenaline-fueled single-player campaign where you'll defend a world on the edge of collapse.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
All right, we're back in the Stone Zone. Just a few more minutes with former state representative and three-term member of Congress, Matt Gaetz. Matt, kind of a lighthearted question. You are consistently among the best dressed and most dapper men in the field of media or politics. Now, neither one of us has shoes like Vish Burra, but other than that, would you care to share your style tips for those of the audience who are looking to dress to impress?
Very well. I don't select any of my own clothes. My wife dresses me. And if I ever look like a clown, it's because she's down that day and I got access to the closet myself. I have no effective sense of style. actually HBO made a movie about me called The Swamp, and it was before I met my wife, and it's reflective of really someone who probably got dressed in the dark or had some serious color blindness. And I always appreciate, looking at the like Stone on style tips, but I've never been able to fully integrate them. And my wife, she tries to keep me in a clean, fresh look. I wear a lot of black and white, and try not to spill on myself too much.
Well, then you've given away your secret, because you've definitely upped your game. I think you look great, and it's all due to your wonderful wife, Ginger. I want to thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Matt Gaetz, once again, the host of the Matt Gaetz Show on One America News. Absolute must-watching for American conservatives or anyone who is a free thinker. Matt, God bless you, and thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Folks, thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.